Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
What's up, Supernatural superfans? I'm Chrissy Lenz.
And I'm Nate McWhorter.
And we're the host of
Gank That Drink,
a supernatural drinking game podcast.
It's the podcast where we make up drinking game rules for our favorite episode of our favorite show, Supernatural.
We recap the episode for you and let you know how all the rules played out.
Then we let you know the drinking game rules for the next episode, so you can play along.
Plus, members get every episode early and ad-free.
With some extra bonus content chit-chat at the end of each episode as a member exclusive.
So download Gank That Drink, a supernatural drinking game podcast wherever the finest podcasts are available.
And or become a member at truestory.fm/gankthatdrink.
And when you're out there in the world saving people and hunting things,
you know, the family business.
Keep the Gank That Drink motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and party on.
Party on, dudes.
Oh, there you are. I was hoping I'd cross paths with you today. I'd like to invite you to visit the Story Well. It's a place where storytellers of all stripes gather. From improv performers to authors, screenwriters to playwrights, we all tell stories. But we're not here to talk about craft. We're here to make something out of nothing. Each episode of the podcast, your host, that's me, sits down with a creative person, and based on a series of random prompts, we get elements that we make into a story. Will it be a noir novel about King Kong? Or a Broadway musical about JFK? Even we don't know. That's the fun part. But what do you get out of this, besides a good time with fun people? Simple. The idea is then yours. That's right. Whatever we come up with, we give it away for anyone to use however they'd like, no strings attached. It's like each episode comes with a free prize inside. The Story Well with Kyle Olson. We'll save you a seat at the table.
I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The Amphibian Man is over. This must be love at first sight. Do you want to talk about it?
Let's talk about Amphibian Man, Pete.
Amphibian Man. This was one that we had come across when we were initially building our list for our Soviet science fiction series years ago.
Right. When we first did Soviet Sci-Fi, this was one we contemplated doing, but we were only squeezing 3 in, and we already found those other 3. So we went with those, but this one's been sitting around. And then when I decided, you know what, I want to return to Soviet Sci-Fi, this was an easy one to throw on the list.
It sure was. It is, Andy, more wholesome than I expected it to be. This is a wholesome movie.
It's a very, in my review, I said it was like a fable. It also feels kind of like a fairy tale. There's something that feels very, very light about the way that the story unfolds. And it's interesting because it's in our Soviet Sci-Fi series. And I guess you could argue there is kind of perhaps a science fiction element in it with the professor/doctor figuring out what to do to, give his son, implant shark gills into his son so he can breathe underwater. But really, it feels much more like fantasy, I felt, the way that the story unfolds. It's much less actual sci-fi and more of kind of this fantastical fairy tale. Would you say that feels that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think you definitely get the science bit in the undersea utopia, right? Like the guy and the fact that his scientific advancement allowed him to to, repair the lungs of his son from this disease. It's kind of a, it actually reminds me of like the libertarian tech bro aspiration, like the tech billionaire aspiration to build a completely free utopia off the coast of California. That's kind of what this guy reminds me of. And I think that's so funny because it's such a culturally Soviet thing, right? That we're celebrating scientific progress in this character, which is the whole Soviet vibe at this time. Look how advanced we are. And the social commentary is subtle, but not propagandistic, right? I didn't feel like they were beating me over the head with ideology in this movie. I think that's some of the fairy tale stuff. Like, it's easy to get lost in the story and not feel like we're being bullied around by, Soviet propaganda.
No, yeah. And I think some of that perhaps comes from the fact that this is right in that period of that kind of that Khrushchev Thaw in the 50s, 60s, when they're relaxing a lot of the repression and censorship. They're trying to be a little more like coexist with other countries, which, the fact that this takes place in Argentina, not that it's said in the film, but apparently it is in the novel, that it takes place in Argentina. I kind of assumed it was Spain because its proximity to the Soviet Union would have made more sense. But I guess it's actually Argentina. So that also just lends to the fact that they're telling stories that are a little bigger and they don't necessarily feel as motivated to be so Stalinistic anymore.
Yeah, right. And yet, so the underwater utopia we've already mentioned is deeply communist. The villain is a straight up capitalist, right? Like he is just like ordering his manservants to dive again and again and again, right? He's just profiteering. So it's not like it's not there, but it's not there in the same way that those are the stories we tell today. Like I feel like that's kind of timeless villainy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that this type of villain is easy to do even in, American films. The hardcore capitalist who doesn't care at all about his workers, who only wants to be exploitative and will do anything, even if it means the death of any of the workers. Like, at the beginning, all of these workers are panicking because they saw the sea devil and they're trying to swim back. And he literally kicks that one guy back into the ocean. It's like, good, then go sort it out. It's like he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And that's, was it Don Pablo? Was that his name?
Pablo's, or Pedro.
Don Pedro. Yeah.
Zunita.
Yeah.
Not a good guy. So I feel like in that aspect, the movie is a kind of a soft sell for those ideals, but it's not one that's completely foreign to us. What do you think of the love story? Because that's the other big part is, can romance transcend the ideology of our Gaston?
Yeah, there's a few different parts. There's that the look at this world. There's this love story. There's this look at, can a man like this survive in regular society? I think that the love story really ends up helping it feel very much like that fairy tale sort of story of a love between two people who are destined to perhaps not fall in love. But, as in many fairy tales, it's all about will they be able to find a way through the differences between them, as in their parts of the world, and find a way to actually love each other. Her dad has decided she's going to marry Don Pedro against her will or not, and because he can pay the money that can help pay off all of her dad's debts. And then at the same time, she has this draw to Ichthyander, which is just the perfect name. I love it. It's like, Alexander, but it's the fish version, Ichthyander.
Does it make you wonder? I wonder if there are some 60-year-old people right now who are named Ichthyander.
Yeah,
This movie was not unpopular.
Right. No kidding.
Yeah.
There's this draw between them. She recognizes something about him because he had saved her early in the film, but when he's wearing his swimming outfit. And then And when he's human, he looks like he's just the handsomest of handsome princes, essentially. But he's also clueless, and that's the funny part. He's like, I don't know, 20-something, and dad has told him nothing about like how to survive in town. Like, it's just, that's kind of a weird element of the story for me. But still, even with his weird initial approaches that he has with her, she still is drawn to him enough that it becomes this connection between the two. And sure, it's like this, it's a fairy tale. Everybody is falling in love like that, like lickety split. Like as soon as they see each other, it's that love at first sight type of story. I think that it works in that sense. You know, I will often have a hard time buying love at first sight types of stories if it doesn't end up being told in some sort of a fairy tale sort of way. And so here I ended up finding that it worked. And then, but it still ended up allowing for kind of that Romeo and Juliet tragedy, not quite that dark, but still it's a tragic end where they're still unable to actually stay together. And I thought that was actually an interesting way to end the film.
Well, not only was it an interesting way to end the film, but I was enough invested in the film that I found it believable. And so jumping ahead, there is a sequence where Ichthyandr is arrested and he is imprisoned in the jail. In the jail, they put a tank for Ichthyandr and they made him get in the tank, and the tank was covered by a grate so that he had to be submerged. And the water he was submerged in was like gray water at best, right? It was like bad water.
Did they just put him in sewage?
That's what I thought too.
It's like so gross.
That was awful. It was just awful. But by then I bought it. Like that felt like a natural thing that this horrible guy might do. And when the dad says, you know, I think it may have damaged your lungs. You may not be able to process air anymore. You may have to live in the sea. And I was kind of in it. Like I didn't stop and question.
No, I thought that they paint that well. And it just, you know, for this type of story, like all of those elements end up working, and it gives you that sense of that tragic fairy tale ending with the unrequited love where they will be unable to actually be together, as heartbroken as they both will be. And it's, you know, I enjoyed the way that the story unfolded. I mean, it's a simple story, but it was one that kept me engaged, and I just enjoyed the characters.
And I mean, both of these people are deeply beautiful people. And it's just a terrible, terrible thing when beautiful people can't be together. Whatever the reason.
It just is the worst, isn't it?
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Anytime you see a beautiful person, you said that person needs another beautiful person in their life.
Totally. Somebody else needs to swim in his deeply like magnetic blue eyes.
Yeah.
Like she's got to dive in those pools.
She really does.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, like, you have the dream sequence partway through the film, and that is the sort of dream sequence that you want in a film like this that gives you hope that they will find a way to work things out. You know, she's wearing a similar suit. They're swimming together in this, like, wonderfully sparkly, processing that they've done to the film to just give it kind of this shimmery dream quality throughout. And they're just rolling around underwater together, and it's just gives you that sense that things will be okay.
Well, and speaking of technical achievement, right? I mean, this is one of those movies that managed to capture them swimming underwater on the floor of the sea in a way that was clear and photographed well. And I thought it was really engaging. I loved every time we went underwater. I thought it was really great.
Yeah. And it was always one of those tricks. And it actually got me thinking about James Cameron filming in The Abyss and the complexities of filming the shot when it was Ed Harris's character, Bud, dropping off the edge, and he could not have bubbles because he was breathing water at that point, and James Cameron had to ended up shooting it himself to make sure that there were no bubbles leaving going up, because it would have in that POV it would have revealed that there was actually air there, and like that sort of complexity of filming underwater. And I was thinking about that watching this, and like you're dealing with a guy who theoretically is breathing water. Now, he also is breathing air, so sometimes he's making bubbles and stuff. But I was like, they did a pretty good job of making me buy into the fact that this guy's just frolicking around underwater all the time.
Yeah, I bought it. The thing that I I guess I was unclear because I wanted it to be one way, and I don't think it was. It really was like, he's a human, right? That's the thing that's not like he's half and half, halvesies. We spent the first 20 minutes in our member pre-show today talking about other movies where you have creatures that are half human, half something else. He is medically half something else, right? Surgically adapted to live under the water. And every time he's in the water, well, most of the time he's in the water, he puts on the shimmery, bejeweled unitard, right? The wetsuit. I mean, that's a 1960s Soviet choice to me.
Yeah, well, but also it just looked cool. Like, it's cooler seeing him in that than just swimming. Well, because he needs flippers. He's got to have his flippers and his goggles still.
And his gloves. I mean, his gloves were webbed when he was in his uniform.
And he's got fins on his outfit. So all of it just allows for more aerodynamic swimming. It was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
I will say there were times where he would, like, the things like were taken off of him or things like that, but then somehow he was still getting his suit back. And I'm like, how, like, he was in jail and he broke out. At what point did he actually get his flippers to put back on his feet?
Yeah.
Like those fins. Like, I'm not sure, like, were they just stashed? Does he have extras stashed in the rocks on the beach when
Probably.
needed? Yeah.
He's very thoughtful. He likes to prepare.
Yeah. And, going back to the point about the film, how he's, as far as like a half and half, it's like, well, he had this operation because he had this lung disease so that he could breathe, and his dad gave him shark gills. But there is a scene, and I did want to ask about this, when he comes into the little undersea like gift shop that Gutierrez and her dad run. Don Pedro is there and sees him coming for his woman, basically, and they start fighting. And there is a moment where Ichthyandr like grabs him and like is able to like push him away. And the way that I saw it is, I was like, oh, does he have extra superhuman fish force that he's able to use when he's fighting people? Like, what is going on here? Because they painted it like he was extra strong and could easily handle Don Pedro. Was I just reading into that?
No, you're absolutely right. I read that exactly the same way. And I thought, well, I mean, he swims a lot more than Don Pedro does, I imagine.
Okay, yeah.
Like, his cardio is much better.
Right. It's the swimmer's body.
His long, lean muscles, like he does, swimmer's body. And maybe he just is stronger than Don Pedro. Could be. But that's another scenario where I kind of wanted him, and maybe this is because I'm in that frame when I see dude who can swim real good, is I kind of wanted him to be 1960s Russian Aquaman.
I've got another thing also.
Okay, go.
When they attack him underwater and they're the two divers who grab him and everything, he starts doing something and we cut to a dolphin like swimming at him. I'm like, oh my God,
calls a dolphin.
He's calling a dolphin. He is Aquaman. And then that never resolved, but it really started painting it like that's what was going on.
That is exactly it. I wanted Aquaman. He talks to the dolphin. Dolphin ignores him, which maybe is the point. Like, the dolphin's like, you're like, fine. Yeah. I have a fish to catch, and took off. And so maybe that's just to remind us, you guys, he's not Aquaman. Look what happens when he screams underwater. Nothing happens.
Although they can hear him, they just don't listen. That's the lesson learned.
That's the dolphin. It's just like, oh, right, can do, but won't. So that was a real issue for me. I feel like the movie snatched, defeat from the jaws of victory. It was going in the right direction, and it kind of let me down. Yeah, and it's interesting because it does feel like it was setting some things up. It actually got me to a point where I was like, is this an edited down version of the film? Like, had there been other iterations of the movie? From what I can tell, no. This is like the film, and everything, if anything, the version that we watched is on Hulu, and it's unfortunately the English dubbed version, but it's a little over an hour and a half. The Wikipedia entry for the film is actually less than that. It's 82 minutes. So I don't know. I guess I don't know what we're watching, but it seemed that if we watched
a version that it was actually one of the longer ones. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like it's still cut down.
Yeah, it feels like
still
something's
unfinished.
missing. Right, yeah. Yeah, very strange. And it actually makes me curious about the book. It's based on Alexander Beliaev's novel. Actually, the original title apparently was Tarzan of the Sea, but I guess Edgar Rice Burroughs' estate took umbrage with the name, and they had to change it. So, but I'm curious if the element in the book goes a little deeper in some of these directions, because that would give me a sense that they started filming something and then just lost the fact that they were filming those threads.
So you mentioned the thaw period, which is, exceptional because things were starting to lighten up. And still, I'm reading this article on the Portalist that says it's reported that Soviet authorities were not pleased by the movie, seeing it as, quote, too foreign and beautiful. I feel like that's a telling response to the movie.
Yeah, that is funny.
The people. So can we let's talk just briefly about the Guillermo del Toro question?
Yeah, isn't this interesting?
Yeah,
I guess I hadn't thought much of this film, or I might not have remembered our initial conversations about having this on our list at the time. But yeah, when Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water came out, there were people who accused him of plagiarism, saying that the plot is somewhat similar, and even just the name Amphibian Man involving the Soviets in the story, plus it takes place the same year that this took place. And so there were elements that people were pointing out. I think there's enough of a difference in the stories that and again, I haven't read the novel, so I can't speak to any similarities there, but I think that this story was different enough from Shape of Water. I have a hard time saying it's plagiarism. If anything, you could just say maybe inspiration and homage.
Yes, I'm in camp homage too. And I'm in camp homage because Guillermo del Toro has an extraordinary vat of earned credibility for me as an original filmmaker, right? And I just can't see this being a plagiarized material in his mind. It feels really very much like an homage to something great. Tarantino calls it his favorite water movie. Like, this is a movie that just celebrates all the things that, frankly, maybe I didn't even know I wanted out of Amphibian Man, which is like, let's get busy, crazy fish man. Let's get busy with and let's invest a little bit more in the relationship that they do in Shape of Water, he says delicately. And so, I think this is, I think it's okay to celebrate this as potential sort of intellectual source material. I don't think you could call it a copy.
Well, and it's interesting because this wasn't the only film brought up against Shape of Water as far as in accusations of plagiarism. There was another film called Let Me Hear You Whisper that was a 1969 story about a cleaning lady who bonds with a dolphin and tries to rescue it from a lab. And so it's interesting that a number of different people seemed to feel that that he had been pulling from them. Even Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who we love, accused the film of plagiarizing some of the scenes within his films, Amelie, Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, as far as kind of the style and look and everything. And I mean, Del Toro, like, the main film that I heard him referencing was Creature from the Black Lagoon. And like he would always say, what if you took that but turned it into a love story? And then I think if he's taking some of these other elements, I mean, Del Toro reminds me of the Tarantino type of filmmakers who have a vast understanding of film history in their own heads and end up pulling a lot of the content of stories that they are fans of and that they remember into their own work, but molding it in their own ways. I mean, it's like saying that Django Unchained is plagiarizing all the Django films. And I feel like, if anything, Del Toro, for me, I mean, I'm in Camp Pete on this, that it's Camp Homage, where it's like he is such a fan of all of these different things that is drawn to the tone and the style and infuses his own original film with some of these ideas. But I just think that doesn't, for me, make it plagiarism.
Yeah, that's where I fall too, and I think he's a superlative filmmaker and director. And I don't love all of his movies, but I think they certainly reek of Guillermo del Toro. And so I'm really fine.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that I think people are going to find similarities and point them out, but it just doesn't necessarily make it a thing.
Yeah. Okay. So what have we knocked out here? We've talked about our scientific advancement in the Soviets. We've talked about our forbidden love themes. We've talked about our straight up profiteering plutocrat.
Yeah, I think one of the elements that I think is interesting, and I think this speaks to the changing of thought and time, or the changing of thought with time, is the way that the ocean is treated. And I thought that this was an interesting moment where you have this ideal of the professor wanting to create a society where people could live underwater and breathe underwater, and there is no rich or poor. It's just, very communist and happy. But I think that it's interesting that we also don't necessarily talk about the actual exploitation of the ocean in this film. And I think that really speaks to the time, because this is the sort of story where you really have the opportunity to deal with some of that, like as far as exploiting the ocean. Here you have a community of pearl divers, and they're all collecting these pearls and everything like that. And even Ichthyandr gets in on that and is fine. He goes down when this is when he's up at the dance and they're all hanging out. Some other guy comes up to Gutierrez to ask her to dance, and he knocks her purse off, and it falls off the cliff and lands in the ocean. And she had her necklace of pearls in there that she was going to give to her reporter friend so that he could, his paper could survive. And all of these guys, because they're all just show-offs and want to prove how awesome they are, they all dive off the cliff to go try to get her purse. And of course, it's Ichthyandr is the only one who can dive deep enough to actually get it. In the process, he also sees a beautiful coral and says, oh, you know what? I'm just going to snap a piece off of this and give it to her like a flower.
Yep.
And I'm just like, okay, it's the era and it's the thing. But it's funny because in a story about a man who can live underwater, he is totally fine with the exploitation of it. Like, he's giving out all these fish from the fish, the fishmonger at the little market, and gets in trouble with the law. But he's just like, oh, take it. Why is it a problem? There are so many fish. Everyone should get fish for free. Like, he is all about exploiting the water, and it's just not a thing. And I thought that was actually interesting to see in a story like this, because today, if you were telling this story, that would absolutely be a big part of it.
I wonder though, because he is a creature of land who happens to be able to, through dint of science, live underwater.
True.
He is not a creature of the water. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
His allegiance is obviously to the land, and underwater, he's just like everybody else. It's just a race to kind of figure out what's going on. The reason he might come off as kind of nice underwater in any regard is because he doesn't have any experience, any aquatic moral relativism, because he's been so sheltered. And so I think that's interesting. He's not Aquaman for this very real reason. The fish don't listen to him, and he's okay picking coral.
Yeah, he's terrible.
He's not really a good guy. That's actually really interesting. His naivety leads him to be kind of not a good guy.
Yeah, he's not a good representation for somebody who can lead this new society.
Right.
Which I find very interesting in the story.
Yeah, well, talk more about that. The guy who can lead the society. What do you reckon the relationship is between dad scientist and the boy? The dad is using him as a showpiece to show off his mad sciencing skill. But in terms of the future of this underwater society, because dad has already said, I know we've already built what we have, but now we have to move on and build a new secret society underwater somewhere else. So we're going to go and do this again. What do you think his long-term plans, what does the movie set up his long-term plans for his son to be?
Well, that's interesting, because that's where there are some issues with the whole idea and conceit, because if this is dad's idea and dad wants to, from his own little secret base, which I will say the model work with his little orb elevator that kind of goes up and down through the rock was pretty cool. There are issues with the whole conceit, because if his goal is to kind of figure out how to kind of create a society like this, first off, he's doing a piss poor job of training his son to actually be any sort of leader. Like, his son is naive to every part of the world. Like, what has dad been doing? I don't know. How old is Ichthy? Maybe in his 20s is what I was guessing. If anything, late teens, early 20s. And he doesn't know how to interact in town. It's like, how has he not brought him in town at this point? Like, he is half human. Like, he should be training him on how to actually live in human society too.
Well, I mean, he's all human. He's all
human, right. He's all human, but he has gills. But yeah, he doesn't, like, he isn't going to school. He's like doing nothing to actually get his son in a position where he could actually even take over. Like, is his son learning science? I'm not getting any sense of that at all. Like, all he's
not
doing
a leader
is,
of men.
Yeah, he's going out and playing in the water all the time. Like, he's just like the absolute bum of the sea is really what he is. So he's going to be the worst.
Bum of the sea. Yeah. That's actually the direct translation.
And to that end, it's like, Dad, if this is his goal, he's not getting there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I feel like there's a sequence at the end where he admits he's kind of giving up with his current location, and I read that as, oh, he's giving up on his son too. Like, I think he's just done with everything. He's going to wash his hands of it. Maybe he'll tell Ichthy where he ends up in a few months.
Right. But it's interesting because, like, when we first kind of really get a sense of Dad's lair and everything, it's when a reporter friend comes to, like, visit him, and he kind of gives him the tour and introduces him to Ichthy and everything, and you're getting this sense for the reporter that, wow, I'm getting the scoop of the century, and Dad's not letting him actually do anything with it, it was kind of funny. And so I was just like, okay, so where are we going here in the story? Like, how does this tie into Dad's end goal of creating this society by even really filling this reporter friend in on everything?
Yeah. And reporter friend has ulterior motives. Like, he's got a bit of a rebellious streak in him anyway, like offering himself up to get arrested just to play with the authorities. It seems counter to the entire logic of the dad's narrative to embrace the reporter as part of the crew. I don't know, and I didn't care so much for the reporter. Like, I didn't care for his sort of role. I didn't think we needed it. It felt like we're just adding trying to add a weird spice to something that already tasted fine. It was fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting element of it. I guess we're getting a sense that for a minute I was like, is this another potential romance for Gutierrez? But then it's like, okay, no, I guess they're just old friends, but she's going to help him. My sense with that was really just like the society and how there are these struggles for the people, because even their news business is starting to fail, and he's, having to hawk everything that he owns just so he can pay the bills, and that's why she gives him her necklace, her pearl necklace.
Yeah, maybe that's the sort of cultural angle, but I feel like that was already represented in just our experience in the town and our experience with the divers, right? They were not living the dream.
No.
And all of it was the result of the love interest, which was already settled in the movie. Like, we already had Don Pedro, and an additional love interest in the form of this old friend just makes it a trio. That's just too much, right? So I kind of felt like he was a hat on a hat in this movie. I didn't necessarily need him. The story was already complete for me. And the fairy tale was complete. We already had all the requisite pieces in play.
I guess, if anything, we just really need that additional piece to work for the big prison escape at the end.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we need that guy.
Yeah. That's really when
warden.
Well, and the reporter, because the reporter is the one driving the truck, right?
You're right. He put on his triple secret leather jacket, and then nobody knew who he was. Then he was suddenly a concrete dust delivery boy.
Yeah,
I don't know what he was doing.
Something. What did you think of the look? Were there things that stood out for you outside of the water?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's really the showpiece is the water. The town is cute. It was filmed. Where was it filmed? Is Azerbaijan?
Yeah. Off the Black Sea, right?
Yeah. I don't really have a concept of what Azerbaijan looks like compared to Argentina. So it fit for me in 1961. I feel like it looked good. It looked natural. It looked real. It didn't look like, big studio soundstage.
I loved that when we got into some of the chase scenes and everything, like there's a point where Ichthy is running through town from the cops. And there were some great like POV shots that were kind of surprising to see, some fun shots that we had of him. He really kind of at a point becomes like Prince Ali, where he's just like scampering across the rooftops and making all these crazy leaps and everything. Like that was also just fun to see, and the way that they were shooting that, and like playing with the water truck. Like they did some fun moments throughout the film that actually just like I was pleasantly surprised with some of the POVs. And there was a nice crane shot that we had, I think, when he's first running through the streets, and we're kind of like craning up and looking down at the
all the street options.
Yeah, right.
As he was turning. Yeah, great. I think I wrote you right at that moment. It was like, oh my God, he just disappeared into the belly of a water tanker and he's fine. I thought that's the movie really had me. No, I think you're exactly right. That chase scene is great because they did a lot of really fun things with the camera, right? They put the camera up high, as you said. They also put it on the ground in some really fun ways and had him run like over it. Like it was a really active sequence. I thought that was great.
Yeah. No, they were having fun with it.
More shots than maybe that sequence deserved. You know what I mean? Like that camera was moving.
Yeah. No, well, but I think it just made it feel alive, and that's what I loved about it. And, these are the directors, Gennadiy Kazanskiy and Vladimir Chebotaryov. I don't know enough about them and kind of what the sort of work they were doing in Russian film, but I felt that they had a good handle on the way that these were unfolding, and give it some energy like that. And I think you're going to amp things up in a way that works well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really fun.
Again, it just kind of taps into a really creative vibe in Soviet cinema at this time, where they were doing some fun things like this. So,
what's interesting? It doesn't feel like the other Soviet science fiction movies we watched, right? Like those movies to a film did some things that were crazy. Like science fiction meant we're going to do some things that are nutso. We're going to make a head-shaped cake. We're just going to do some really strange stuff. And this movie feels so kind of just on rails, as a fairy tale. This feels like a fairy tale. And the fact that it feels so hand to glove, like the same lessons we would be teaching our kids about greed and good and evil and love and loss, like that's the thing that I think is maybe most interesting about this movie, is that it feels so familiar just in Russian.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think it's got kind of like these musical interludes of like the Spanish or Argentine people dancing and stuff like that. And it just allowed for this story to unfold in a very easy way that, like, I mean, if I watched this as a kid, I probably would have just really enjoyed it, because it just feels like another familiar fairy tale type of story. It's very easy to like, very simple and not in a disparaging way, but just like a lot of times you find that type of storytelling works best when it's told simply.
Yeah, it is universal.
Yeah.
These are universal elements.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about it. So we'll be right back, but first our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Charlie Ryan, Louis Adrian, River Loom, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.
In the depths of the ocean, a young man discovers a world of wonder and adventure, but in the eyes of those above the surface, he's seen as something to be feared, exploited, and ultimately destroyed. This is the story of Ichthyandr, the protagonist of the 1961 Soviet science fiction film Amphibian Man. Born with a rare lung condition, Ichthyandr is given a second chance at life when his scientist father implants him with shark gills, allowing him to breathe underwater as well. As he grows up, Ichthyandr finds solace in the sea, exploring its beauty and mystery with a sense of freedom he's never known on land. But Ichthyandr's world is turned upside down when he meets Gutierrez, the beautiful daughter of a local pearl diver. As the two fall in love, they find themselves caught between the prejudices of the surface world and the greed of those who seek to exploit Ichthyandr's unique abilities. Gutierrez's father, torn between his love for his daughter and his fear of the unknown, becomes an unwitting pawn in a dangerous game that threatens to tear the young lovers apart. At the next reel, we believe that stories like The Amphibian Man have the power to transport us to new worlds and challenge our perceptions of what's possible. That's why we've created the Watch page at thenextreel.com/watch to curate a selection of films that push the boundaries of cinema and spark the imagination. Our Watch page is your guide to the movies we've covered on the Next Reel Film Podcast, The Film Board, Movies We Like, and Trailer Rewind. From sci-fi classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Planet of the Apes, to overlooked gems like Moon and Gattaca. Each title is accompanied by convenient links to rent or purchase the film through Apple or Amazon. So whether you're in the mood for a thought-provoking drama or an action-packed adventure, you're just a click away from your next movie. But the Watch page isn't just about discovering great films, it's also about supporting the podcasts that bring these stories to life. When you use our links to rent or buy a movie, you're helping to sustain the Next Reel's family of film podcasts and our mission to explore the art and craft of cinema. Like Ichthyandr, who finds strength in his connection to the sea, we find strength in our connection to our listeners and supporters. So dive in and explore the depths of cinema with thenextreel.com/watch. From the comfort of your own home, you can embark on a journey of discovery, uncovering new worlds and new perspectives with every film you watch. And just like Ichthyandr and Gutierrez, you may find that the greatest adventures are the ones that challenge us to see the world in a different light. Visit thenextreel.com/watch today and join us in celebrating the power of cinema to transform, inspire, and unite us all. Because at The Next Reel, we believe that every film has the potential to change the way we see the world and ourselves.
How to do it award season.
Believe it or not, this film had one nomination, and it was at the Trieste Science and Fiction Festival, which was the very first year of this festival. This is an Italian film festival for science fiction, and this film was nominated for Best Film, and it ended up winning the Silver Award, tying with X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. Both films lost the gold to another tie between Voyage to the End of the Universe and La Jetée. Yeah.
I feel like that's probably a fair loss. I expected there to be more, honestly, as it seems like this movie was kind of a big deal.
You know, I don't know how well it reached outside of the Soviet Union at the time. Like, I don't know if it played in the States. It sounds like, right. I mean, Tarantino talks about growing up watching the English dub on TV, so at some point it made that transition, but I can't imagine this playing in the U.S. theaters at the time.
Yeah. Well, how to do at the box office, because I know that the Soviet era box office numbers were highly publicized.
I wish I could say I really can't remember how I did with our last Soviet Sci-Fi series. Like, were the numbers accessible when we did that? I don't know. I'm guessing it's comparable to this, which is limited. I have no idea what the budget was for this film. This film did premiere in Moscow December 28th, 1961, then opened January 3rd, 1962 in the Soviet Union and played in a few other European countries, but that's all I can find. It seemed to do really well in the USSR, landing in the number one spot for the year with 65.5 million admissions during its initial run, then up to 100 million admissions in reruns, which is the highest for a Soviet film until 1974. I did find actually on another site a reference that this would translate to about $520 million in 2007 dollars, but I just don't have any other information, unfortunately. So I'm just going to have to assume it made its money back.
Yeah, it had to make its money back. Everybody's just wearing like swim diapers. There's like no costumes. It's just jumping. There was clearly no support, safety, security. They're just free diving, just jumping off cliffs and stuff. Like, that doesn't cost anything. Here's a guy, push him off a boat.
But they built a whole underground lair, Pete. That costs money.
Do you think they actually they James Cameroned it and actually built it underwater?
I think so. I think they really did.
Man. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I'm really glad we watched it. I think it's a great addition to our Soviet sci-fi. I had a lot of fun with it. And, as we say, not a perfect movie, but a delightful addition.
Yeah, lots of fun to watch, and it's just an easy watch. So check it out, everybody, if you haven't seen it yet. Hopefully this conversation will get you to do so. Well, we'll be right back for our ratings, but first, here's the trailer for next week's movie. Wrapping up our return to our Soviet sci-fi series is Georgy Danelya's 1986 film, Kindzadza.
Вот машинка перемещения в пространстве. Так какой контакт мне нажимать, чтобы домой переместиться?
Значит, сработала эта хреновина. Пошли, пошли! Тихо.
Так.
Вовка, ты где?
Люсенька, родная моя. Катя, давай спичку.
А ну быстро все! В корыто!
Это планета Плюк. Галактика Киндзадза в спирали.
Играй.
Маймуна Верешвила.
Господин Уэф, я представитель цивилизованной планеты и требую, чтобы вы проследили бы за своим лексиконом.
Соседство с галактикой Киндзадза – наша беда.
Дядя Вова, давай еще. Ку!
Вот, вывези нас отсюда, а ну тебе ку. Встать!
Ну, скрипка!
Ку!
Strangers in the night, exchanging glances, warm rain in the night. What will have chances shall be fall in love, in love before.
Do you ever find yourself pondering the existential implications of aquatic respiration? You're staring at a goldfish, contemplating the sheer audacity of its gill-based existence, and suddenly you feel a kinship, a yearning for the subaquatic embrace of the shimmering kelp-laden domain. It's a peculiar sensation, but building a personalized bioluminescent pressure-resistant diving apparatus, well, let's just say it presents logistical challenges. But what if I told you? What if I told you there's an alternative, a pathway to connect with fellow denizens of the sea without resorting to surgical augmentation? A digital grotto of shared fascination. Prepare yourself for a revelation! The Next Reel family of film podcasts membership program unlocks a veritable cornucopia of amphibious delights. Periodic bonus episodes descending deep into the esoteric mysteries of cinema. Early access. Get a privileged glimpse into the freshest episodes before they grace the ears of the uninitiated. In-episode bonus content. Is this a director's cut of a podcast? You decide. But hold on, the wonders continue. Ad-free versions, an uninterrupted immersion into the cresting waves of narrative, and for the truly devoted, access to live stream recording sessions, a glimpse behind the curtain of podcast creation. Plus, exclusive secret channels in our Discord community, a digital agora for spirited debates on the socio-political ramifications of life in the cinematic seas. And the ultimate reward, the profound satisfaction of directly supporting the podcasts you love, nurturing the very ecosystem. So forsake the siren call of the deep and join our vibrant community today. Visit truestory.fm/join and embark on your amphibious adventure. Don't just tread water. Wade into the extraordinary.
Letterboxd, Andy, you know what that means.
I sure do.
It's time to see how this movie stacks up to your other very favorite movies.
All of them.
Will it dethrone what? Fight Club?
You know, I did enjoy this film. It's, again, sometimes when you have these light, easy to watch films, it doesn't necessarily equate to high stars, but definitely still going to give it a heart. It's 3 stars and a heart for me. I had a fun time with this one, and I am totally fine with it living in that 3-star zone.
You know, I was writing my review last night, and I was trying to figure out, is this a 4-star or a 3-star? And I think I think it's a really good movie, and I think I'm just going to also live at the 3-star depth, if you know what I mean. And I think a lot of this is measured on the fact that it is as dated as it is. Like, it just feels like maybe if I were watching it in 1961, it would be a 5-star movie. But right now, it feels like an artifact from another time, and a very, very good one.
Yeah.
I would have no trouble revisiting it.
No, but like of the Soviet sci-fi films we've talked about, this one feels lighter, and maybe I don't like it as much as those. Like, even though To the Stars by Hard Ways was ripped apart on Mystery Science Theater 3000, I still found there like something more interesting in that film. You know, I'd probably return to that one.
What did we end up giving that? Do you remember?
Oh, like a star rating wise?
Yeah.
Let me go check. I'll tell you. We gave it 2 stars.
Okay.
We both rated it 2 stars and no heart. So maybe I'm wrong in thinking that.
That might be my favorite real-time research we've ever done.
But I'm very curious. Like, that's what I'm just so curious to actually revisit, because it was such a strange experience. So yeah, but anyway, but the other 2 for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop talking. All right. Well, this will round to 3 stars and a heart over on our account at The Next Reel. I'm over there at Soda Creek Film. Pete is at Pete Wright, so you can follow us over there. So what did you think about Amphibian Man? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andy.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Letterboxd doeth. 14 people. I think we need to start doing that. 14 people have this movie in their top 4 on Letterboxd. That's an interesting measure for me. I think I'm going to start looking at that.
Out of how many?
9 million.
It looks like it's been seen by almost 3,400 people. So there, okay. I think that helps.
Good, you're right. 14 out of 3,400. Okay, this one comes from Dr. Ethan Leon. It's a first Vladimir Chebotaryov, first Gennadiy Kazanskiy. The Soviet Union's answer to Creature from the Black Lagoon. Even if sometimes the underwater sequences look like they're filmed in a tiny tank and the plot feels a bit pedestrian, by the end, the directors more than make up for it with the gorgeous cinematography and music. Rich in aquatic colors, the greenest greens, the most limpid blues, Ichthyander stands out as a vision of sparkly silver swimming costume. His eyes, a slightly too intense shade of blue eyes whenever the camera focuses on his face for a close-up. Indeed, everyone here feels slightly unreal in their beauty, even the villainous pirates. Sublime music, too, a mixture of instruments and voices to give an ethereal feel to the drama at hand, elevating it above the rather humdrum drama. Standout is the electric organ, played as if it's about to go out of tune whenever Ick descends to the floor below for pearls. Not a world-beating film, but one of the most purely visually gorgeous I've seen for a long time. 3.5 stars for that review.
Oh, well, that's quite nice. I
think
there's a lot of good things to say about
Beautiful.
the film there. That
lovely written.
Yeah, that works quite well. Absolutely. Well, I went the easy route, and I just did a short one by Tori, 3 stars, Shark Boy and Proletariat Girl. Oh, clever people.
Pretty good. That is funny that they landed on amphibian.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think of when you think of amphibian?
I think of a frog.
I think of a frog that created Frog Boy.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the most alluring image.
It's not. And he's not wearing a frog costume, but I will say an amphibian is both aquatic and lives, on land. And I think that's the key. That's probably why it works, because he technically is more of an amphibian man than a shark man.
Yeah, but mermaids can do that too, right?
I guess.
Don't you see my problem? Like, a Hummer can do that too. It can forge a river and drive on a highway. All right. Thanks, Letterboxd. Andy, according to my friend Internet, this is what Letterboxd is. Letterboxd is a global social network for grassroots film discussion and discovery. Use it as a diary to record and share your opinion about films as you watch them, or just keep track of films you've seen in the past. Showcase your favorites on your profile page.
That is a lot.
You bet it is. That's why I want you to tell our fair listeners just one thing you do with Letterboxd that has changed the way you watch movies. Let them have it.
Okay, are you ready for this?
So ready.
I love lists. As of today, I have 246 lists in my account. I use them to track the movies I watch, organize them in all sorts of different ways. I track them by hand. I clone lists from other people. I use them to plan what I'm going to be watching, all sorts of things. I love creating lists. It's a fantastic tool.
Sexiest animated characters. Andy, what is this?
We love Letterboxd, and if you're a movie lover, we are sure you will too. And when you upgrade from the free account, you will remove ads and support the great Kiwi team building this amazing service.
Just use the discount code NEXTREEL or visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd to get 20% off your pro or patron membership. And it works for renewals as well.